Resident Evil, one of the most successful franchises of all time, not only for Capcom but for the entire gaming industry, with a long history of development beginning in 1906 and continuing to this day. The game has maintained an immense appeal to the global gaming community. Alongside a host of terrifying, bloodthirsty enemies and thrilling gunfights, we cannot ignore the incredibly expansive and profound storyline built throughout the series' development. To get ready for the upcoming next installment, Resident Evil Requiem, join us as we recap the major events that have unfolded in this chaotic, indeed, universe. Please note that summarizing every single installment of the series would be very long. Therefore, we will only focus on the games and the canonical events that directly impact the main timeline of this survival horror series. Alright, without further ado, let's begin. First, to truly understand the root of everything that happens in the world of Resident Evil, we need to go back in time, specifically to the earliest days of human civilization in this universe, to learn about the origins of the species that caused the game's pandemics. Progenitor virus. Thousands of years ago in West Africa, there was a tribe called the Ndi who lived in caves and swamps deep in the upstream region of the rivers. One day, the tribe discovered a cave on the edge of the swamp where they lived. Inside, a special flower grew in a single area that received sunlight and had better conditions than the surrounding region. The Ndi gathered and consumed them, completely unaware that these flowers contained a deadly virus. As a result, the virus caused a disease that killed most of those who ate them. However, at least one man survived the infection, and he mutated into a being with superhuman strength. According to ancient Ndi beliefs, these flowers were considered divine or magical. Anyone who survived eating them was deemed worthy of achieving supreme transcendence and could become gods or kings of the kingdom. With the power granted by the flowers, the Ndi civilization developed by leaps and bounds, employing construction techniques that surpassed any other civilization on Earth at the time. These people built a colossal city inside the caves, using complex reflective materials to channel light into the city. They also focused this light into energy beams that shone directly down onto the Garden of the Sun, protecting the land deep within the caves where the flowers were hidden from the eyes of outsiders. As for the mysterious flower, it gradually became a central symbol of the Ndi's faith, representing power and strength. The Ndi tribe built the Stairway of the Sun with the flowers at its center. This became the final milestone for those who claimed to be heirs to the throne, who would climb it to eat these flowers as a ritual of ascension to become powerful beings. Despite thousands of years of sustainable development, the decline of the Ndi kingdom is said to have happened quite suddenly. Some animals somehow came into contact with the virus Midas infected flowers and became extremely dangerous creatures. They were imprisoned in the lower level of a giant sinkhole to contain them and appease the wrath of the gods. But it was not enough. They eventually escaped the sinkhole and began to slaughter the people of the kingdom, killing the king in the chaos. The lucky survivors were forced to flee their homeland. After killing most of the population, these mutated monsters had no more prey to hunt and began to kill and eat each other, leading to the decline of the mighty Ndi kingdom. The remaining people, though unable to return to their city, chose to go back to the swamp region that was their territory and continued to live with the belief that one day they could return to their kingdom with a new king. The Ndi tribe established a law decrying that all men from 13 to 25 years old must serve in the army, guarding the city from intruders and protecting the knowledge of the ruins and the flowers, which was never to be revealed to the outside world. Unlike the viruses that appear in most Resident Evil installments, Lust Plague is actually an arthropod parasite that has existed for a very long time, possibly since ancient times. They were discovered by humans in the rural Valdlobos region of Spain, where a segment of the population harnessed the power of the plague to form a cult and worship them as sacred beings bestowed upon humanity. The cult's initiation rite was performed by implanting the parasite into the bodies of the faithful as part of their doctrine. This ancient cult gradually grew into a formidable force until it was suppressed by Count Gregorio Salazar, an early ancestor of the Salazar family. The brutal purge was swiftly completed, driving the cult to the brink of extinction, while the surviving plagas were sealed deep in the caves beneath a mound, separated by deep canyons and a large body of water. A castle was later built directly on this site to imprison and seal Las Plagas, and the Salazar family was entrusted with the duty of guarding it for generations. A long time passed until Osman Sadler, a descendant of a branch of the old cult that had been exiled to a nearby island, discovered the sealed Las Plagas beneath the castle. He planned to exploit their power for his personal gain and expand his influence by parasitizing humans. Under the guise of a prophet, Sadler approached Ramon Salazar, the eighth castellan of the castle, convincing him that the Salazar ancestors had sinned by sealing this sacred entity. After gaining Ramon's trust, Sadler had the Plagas excavated, restoring the ancient cult under the name Los Illuminados and calling his followers Ganados, meaning cattle in Spanish. Sadler continued to develop his cult in preparation for his grand ambitions. In the late 19th century, a woman named Miranda lived in a remote mountain village in Eastern Europe. In 1909, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Eva. However, in 1919, the Spanish flu pandemic reached the village and swept through, taking so many lives that the cemetery ran out of space, forcing the survivors to bury their loved ones outside the village. Unfortunately, among the victims of this disaster was 10-year-old Eva. Devastated by her daughter's death, Miranda sank into despair. She went to a nearby cave with the intention of taking her own life, hoping to be reunited with Eva. But instead of death, Miranda discovered a colossal, ancient fungal superorganism, an entity that would later be known as the mold. Upon touching this fungal mass, Miranda saw the memories of hundreds, even thousands, of people it had absorbed over the centuries, including Eva's memories. Believing the mold could help her resurrect her daughter, Miranda began to worship the entity as a god, calling it the Black God, and thus embarked on her own fanatical path. Returning from the cave, Miranda infected some of the villagers with the mold, curing them of their illnesses. Using these miracles, she proclaimed herself the prophet of the Black God and gradually built a cult, causing the villagers to revere her as Mother Miranda. Over the following decades, Miranda conducted research on the mold in makeshift labs beneath the village and in ritual areas. In the process, she created the Kadu, a parasitic nematode modified by the mold, and used it for implantation into human bodies from peasants to nobility. Many people became Miranda's test subjects with the goal of creating a perfect host capable of containing a copy of Eva's consciousness and bringing the girl back to the world. However, most experiments failed. Many subjects died immediately after implantation, others transformed into lichens, ferocious mutated creatures. To preserve the village and continue her research, Miranda banished the lichens from the residential area, turning them into a constant threat outside the village. Despite the frequent failures, Miranda still achieved a degree of success by implanting the Kadu into 4 descendants of the feudal families that once ruled the region: Alcinat Imitri Scu, Karl Heisenberg, Don Abeneviento, and Salvatore Moreau. These individuals would later be known as the Four Lords. Although none of them were suitable to become a vessel for Eva, Miranda still recognized their status and allowed the 4 of them to run the region together as a council of power under her absolute control. Miranda's research to resurrect Eva continued for many years until around the 1950s when she accidentally discovered and rescued a hiker lost in the harsh cold weather. That young man's name was Oswald D. Spencer, one of the most important characters in the entire Resident Evil universe to come. We have just reviewed the origins of the most important biohazards in the Resident Evil universe, from the ancient progenitor virus and Las Plagas to the mold. Perhaps many of you are wondering, what do these have to do with the games we are so familiar with? In fact, what we've just discussed isn't the true starting point of the Resident Evil timeline. Rather, they are the seeds that were planted very early on and would only truly reveal their influence many decades later. Therefore, to get everything back in the proper order of the Resident Evil universe, let's set aside the biohazards just mentioned and return to the true starting point of the entire series, the story of Oswald E. Spencer, the man who laid the foundation for the undead catastrophe that would last for decades to come. As for the viruses and entities we just mentioned, don't worry, they will return soon, at the very moment their influence begins to change the world of Resident Evil. Born into the prestigious Spencer family, Oswald E. Spencer was raised with a comprehensive and elite education and was the heir to his family's vast fortune. He was particularly fascinated by the book Natural History Conspectus, a 30-year journey across Africa by the British explorer Henry Travis. Though he lived in luxury, this man's childhood was caught in the turmoil of World War II. While there isn't much specific information about Spencer's life during the prolonged war, growing up in that context played a significant part in shaping his worldview later in life. In the 1950s, Spencer became a university student, studying medicine. There, he befriended Edward Ashford and Drive James Marcus, as all three shared a passion for medicine and biological research. During a solo hiking trip to Eastern Europe, due to inexperience and unfamiliarity with the terrain, Spencer got lost in the snowy mountains and was fortunate enough to be rescued by Miranda, who was conducting research in the area at the time. After bringing Spencer back to the village, Miranda realized they both shared a passion for biology. She saw the young man's great potential and decided to take Spencer on as her student. Here, Spencer was exposed to the mold and learned about the transformative and regenerative capabilities of this special fungal entity. This knowledge deeply inspired Spencer, opening up a completely new path for him to realize his ambition of evolving humanity. However, while Miranda only longed to resurrect her deceased daughter, Spencer harbored a dream of changing the entire world. He gradually realized that the mold was not the right tool to achieve his ideal. This profound difference in worldview led Spencer to leave the village, though he greatly cherished his time with Miranda and the extensive biological knowledge she imparted. Spencer returned to university to seek another path while still maintaining contact with his former mentor. Returning with a completely different mindset, amidst a rapidly escalating Cold War, Spencer gradually formed the belief that humanity was approaching the brink of collapse and that only the biological evolution of a superior moral value system could save its future. With this ideology, he founded a eugenics research group with his scientist friends, including James Marcus, Edward Ashford, Lord Bursley, and Lord Henry. Though they shared a common goal, each had their own ideal. Spencer sought power and control, Marcus research in biological innovation, while Ashford focused on eugenics and healing. In early 1966, Spencer once again immersed himself in Natural History Conspectus, recalling a passage about the Ndi tribe in West Africa, with their rituals centered around a magical flower that could grant immense power. Although these accounts were doubted by others for their authenticity, James Marcus theorized that this flower could naturally produce a virus capable of mutating its user. For the research group, and especially for Spencer, such a clue was more than enough. And so, an expedition to West Africa was organized to find traces of the mysterious flower, led by James Marcus and his student, Brandon Bailey. After 3 months of searching and facing numerous attacks from Ndi warriors trying to protect their ancient city, they finally found the entrance to the secret Ndi kingdom, as well as the Garden of the Sun, where the seemingly mythical flower was in full bloom. They succeeded in isolating the virus from the flowers and named it the progenitor virus. Before he could celebrate his discovery, Marcus faced a harsh reality when he brought the virus and the flowers seeds back to the university for further study. He realized that although the flowers grew healthily, they could no longer reproduce the virus. It turned out the virus could only be activated under special environmental conditions that a standard laboratory could not recreate. This discovery, along with Marcus being indirectly implicated in a scandal involving falsified research results, led to his isolation from the academic community, and his government funding was completely cut off. It was during this period of Marcus's isolation that Spencer made his move. He offered to use the Spencer Foundation to fund Marcus's research, on the condition that he work in a laboratory at the Spencer estate and avoid all contact with other scientific groups besides their own, in order to seize the progenitor virus for himself. When he realized that the foundation could not fund the entire project, Spencer proposed establishing a pharmaceutical company to raise more capital and serve as a cover for future experiments. Ashford, Marcus, and a few other members agreed. And so Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was founded in March 1967, with Spencer coordinating all company activities, Marcus as the lead virologist, and Ashford, though not as prominent, contributing to the initial research. Shortly thereafter, Spencer wrote to his former mentor, Miranda, informing her of the discovery of the progenitor virus and his decision to use the symbol of the four allied families from her village as the company's logo. Later that year, a mansion was built at Spencer's request in the Arklay Mountains of the American Midwest, with the intention of creating an underground laboratory complex to hide its activities from the public. After George Trevor, a renowned architect he admired, completed the projects, Spencer had the ill-fated architect's entire family disposed of to ensure the laboratory secrecy. His wife and daughter were taken to be used as test subjects right beneath the mansion. The mother died almost instantly after being infected with the virus, while her 14-year-old daughter, Lisa Trevor, survived and became a test subject for years to come. In the late 1960s, Spencer partnered with another scientist who shared his eugenics ideals, a Drive Wesker, to begin a top-secret secret project named Project W. Believing that progenitor was only valuable if given to trustworthy individuals, Spencer concluded that genetically superior individuals must also share his value system to become the Ubermensch, superhumans with extraordinary abilities and superhuman strength. This became Spencer's ultimate goal. Umbrella kidnapped children from all over the world with superior genes and intellect, raising and brainwashing them with Spencer's own ideology. When they came of age, Umbrella would select the most outstanding individual for infection. Years later, 13 children were selected for implantation with an improved virus. 11 died almost instantly. Only 2 successfully assimilated the virus, Alex Wesker and Albert Wesker. While Alex could not manifest her powers due to a genetic condition, Albert fully assimilated the virus, gaining superhuman abilities like speed and strength. Wesker was later recruited by Umbrella's research division and gradually became one of the most powerful and prominent villains in the history of the series, which we will discuss in more detail later in the video. Returning to Marcus, due to a shortage of progenitor cultures, he and Bailey planned him in the spring of 1968 to collect more from the flowers. However, Spencer suggested they stay and hired a team of mercenaries to drive off the NDIPA warriors, successfully seizing the Garden of the Sun. Nevertheless, at Spencer's request, Marcus still left West Africa for the United States to oversee the Umbrella Executive Training School, a facility established by Umbrella for training its personnel, which had a laboratory built specifically for his research. Bailey would remain to manage the West African facility, ensuring a supply of progenitor for Umbrella's future research. After Umbrella was established and operational, Spencer gradually realized that his eugenics research and his ambitious path to creating a new human species would be very costly. Despite inheriting a huge fortune, it still wouldn't be enough to sustain the project. Therefore, Spencer made a very bold move, collaborating with the U.S. military to create biological weapons for warfare, thereby receiving a massive budget to continue his true purpose. And thus, the T-Virus project officially began. A bit about the T-Virus project. When the progenitor virus was discovered by Spencer's research team, they immediately recognized its immense potential, especially its ability to restructure genes and promote evolution. But the original virus was too lethal and dangerous to be used directly on humans or for practical applications. Therefore, they began research to optimize the progenitor virus, creating different viral strains that possess the same power but were safer and more stable. Although the three Spencer, Marcus, and Ashford founded Umbrella, they split up to research their own T-virus strains. Therefore, the T-virus in general in the Resident Evil universe is a collection of different viral strains created from the foundation of the progenitor virus. As for Edward Ashford, he and his son Alexander Ashford moved to a laboratory built in an abandoned mine in Antarctica. However, Alexander's expertise was in genetics, not virology, which made them both worry that if Edward were to die too soon, the Ashford family's influence on the new world they were building would end. Therefore, Edward was forced to continue his research alone, while Alexander switched to human cloning experiments with the goal of creating heirs to continue this research in the future. As for James Marcus, he remained at the training facility and continued his research. During this time, Marcus developed an admiration for the prodigies recruited by Umbrella Drive. William Birkin on Drive, Albert Wesker, who were still very young. Marcus grew fond of and trusted them. The breakthrough in the T-virus project came to James Marcus when he combined leech DNA with the progenitor virus, successfully creating a viral strain stable enough for bioweapon research. This discovery was reported by Marcus to Umbrella in January 1978. And from then on, the new virus strain was officially classified for further development. In the following months, Marcus researched by expanding tests to amphibians, reptiles, and finally mammals. However, as he became more engrossed in his work, Marcus grew increasingly obsessed to an extreme degree, beginning to consider the possibility of direct human testing. The trainees working at the research facility became his test subjects as he tricked them into being exposed to virus-infected leech samples in the lab. As time went on, Marcus's experiments became more brutal and inhumane, far exceeding the limits of conventional scientific research. While James Marcus was making great strides in his research, Oswald Spencer was at a standstill, unable to create a T-virus strain that bore his own mark. This setback gradually eroded Spencer's ambition, turning it into deep paranoia. He believed his colleagues would eventually surpass him, even usurp the position and power he had worked so hard to build within Umbrella. Unwilling to accept this, Spencer chose a more sinister path. Instead of continuing to pursue his failing research, he began to see his own colleagues as obstacles to be eliminated. A plan gradually took shape: eliminate his rivals and seize their entire research legacy, thereby reshaping Umbrella according to his own personal ambitions. First, he indirectly caused the death of Edward Ashford and staged it as a laboratory accident. Next, Spencer used evidence of Marcus's experimental abuses as a reason to remove his old friend from research control, shutting down the training academy and transferring William Birkin and Albert Wesker to the Arclay Laboratory in 1978. This incident made Marcus suspect that Spencer was trying to steal his research data. He decided to stay at the lab and continue working, intending to present his findings to the Umbrella Executive Board, believing it would help him gain the necessary support to take control of the company. But unbeknownst to him, Spencer had anticipated this move. In 1988, the Umbrella Security Service, or U.S., was sent to infiltrate the lab and shoot Marcus dead. Birkin and Wesker, the two students he had once trusted most, were now Spencer's insiders, accompanying the assassination squad. They quickly collected all the data and brought it back to the Arclay Laboratory to continue the research. Marcus's body, along with unwanted specimens, was disposed of in the waste system. Afterward, Umbrella nearly erased all documents related to Marcus. The plan had succeeded. Everything was now under Spencer's control. G-virus and T-virus. After being transferred to the Arclay Laboratory in 1978, Birkin and Wesker began their T-virus research under Spencer's supervision. There, they succeeded in creating a new T-virus strain that allowed the host to survive in a ferocious state with severe brain damage, but still able to maintain basic biological functions. However, subsequent tests showed that about 10% of the population had a natural immunity to this virus, making it unsuitable for military purposes. To solve this problem, Birkin shifted his research focus to bio-organic weapons, or BOWs. The result was the Hunter Alpha, a combat creature created by combining reptilian DNA with human embryos via the T-virus. In the next phase, Umbrella began the Tyrant Project with the goal of creating a human-form bioweapon with superior physical strength, while still possessing intelligence comparable or close to a human's to retain the ability to receive and execute complex commands. By 1988, the Arclay Laboratory was at a standstill again as the Tyrant Project encountered a serious problem. Because the beneficial mutation properties of the T-virus were closely tied to brain biochemistry, a virus that caused brain damage became a major obstacle. In the development of the T-1 and T-2 models, Birkin created a T-virus strain that reduced the level of brain damage, but in return, it required the host to possess extremely rare genetic traits only 1 in 10 million people were suitable. Spencer helped Birkin access a virus sample from Umbrella Europe with the ability to take control of the brain, but it was also notorious for killing its host during integration. When he ran out of subjects for testing, he was forced to use the parasite on Lisa Trevor, the architect's daughter who had survived years of experimentation. Birkin discovered that her body contained a mutated progenitor strain. Recognizing the eugenic potential of this virus, Birkin requested funding from Umbrella for the G-virus, and thus NESD, an underground research facility located next to a chemical plant on the outskirts of Raccoon City, was completed in 1991. Birkin served as the lead researcher, along with his wife Annette, managing a team of elite scientists, the rebirth of James Marcus. Back in 1988, when the Umbrella Security Service U.S. was sent to assassinate James Marcus, his body and some research specimens were discarded into a nearby wastewater treatment system. Among the items considered trash was the Queen Leech, a leech containing the T-virus. Seeing Marcus's body as a food source, it began to consume the corpse. When it devoured the brain, the Queen Leech absorbed all of Marcus's memories, knowledge, and consciousness. From that moment, the creature no longer saw itself as just a lowly parasite but believed it was James Marcus, reborn, a divine resurrection. Along with Marcus's memories, emotions, and ambitions, the Queen Leech also inherited a deep-seated hatred for Umbrella, the organization that had betrayed, eliminated, and discarded him like a worthless tool. In its distorted perception, Umbrella was not just the enemy but a symbol of betrayal and depravity that needed to be punished. In May 1998, the Queen Leech struck first at the Arclay Laboratory. It sabotaged the facility, causing all employees to become victims of the virus. The B.O.W.S. escaped and entered the surrounding forest, leading to a series of mysterious deaths in the Arclay Mountains. Not stopping there, on the night of July 23, 1998, it attacked the Ecliptic Express, the train under Umbrella's control, on its way to the training facility. By spawning a multitude of viral leeches, it turned all the passengers on the train, who were Umbrella employees, into infected hosts. These actions were no longer just a shadowy revenge plot, they marked the moment the disaster spiraled out of control. And it is from this chain of events that the events of the Resident Evil games officially begin, with the starting point being Resident Evil Zero. Resident Evil Zero. The story begins in 1998. The Raccoon City Police Department, or R.P.D., had been receiving a series of reports about bizarre murders in the Arclay Mountains area, which, as we know, were caused by the creatures that escaped after the Queen Leech's sabotage. Although the R.P.D. reassured the public, it was not enough to quell the suspicions of the city's residents. Amid public pressure and the police force's inability to solve the case, the R.P.D. decided to hand over the mission to STARS on July 9th of that year. A little about STARS. It stands for Special Tactics and Rescue Service, an elite special unit of the United States under the management of the Raccoon City Police Department, tasked with handling special operations such as counter-terrorism, suppressing dangerous urban crime, and responding to special situations, in this case, investigating the series of mysterious deaths in the Arclay Mountains. Behind the scenes, via Raccoon City's Chief of Police, Brian Irons, Albert Wesker, the captain of Alpha Team and Umbrella Spy, intended to use the superior combat capabilities of the STARS forces to test the real-world effectiveness of the B.O.W.S. When Bravo Team was sent to investigate the Arclay region, Wesker seized the opportunity to initiate the first step of the test. He secretly sabotaged Bravo Team's helicopter, causing the team to crash upon approaching the operational area, leading to a loss of contact right at the start of the mission. However, they were lucky enough to survive and split up to continue the operation, while pilot Kev and Dooley stayed behind to repair the helicopter. Switching to the perspective of Rebecca Chambers, the team's medic, while searching, she discovered the Ecliptic Express had stopped, and all its lights were off. Upon boarding to investigate, she was horrified to find that all the passengers on the train had turned into horrifying and ferocious creatures. There, Rebecca met Second Lieutenant Billy Cohen, who was being transported as a prisoner and had also crashed nearby. However, an argument broke out between them, and they refused to cooperate. Around the same time, a Delta team from the U.S. was deployed by Drive William Birkin and Albert Wesker to regain control of the train, but was quickly defeated. A swarm of Marcus's leeches, now the Leech Queen, attacked, inadvertently causing the train to move at an uncontrollable speed. Rebecca and Billy, unaware of this, quickly made their way to the engine car to activate the emergency brake system, and the train eventually crashed into the Umbrella Executive Training School, the training facility for Umbrella's personnel and also the location of James Marcus's laboratory. Rebecca and Billy, having miraculously survived, entered the academy only to discover a horrific scene, the result of Marcus's inhumane experiments from years before, with corpses, skeletons, and dried blood stains coloring the entire place. During this time, Birkin and Wesker decided to activate the facility's self-destruct sequence to eliminate James Marcus once and for all. Rebecca and Billy's journey continued, leading them to a confrontation with the Queen Leech, who then revealed everything that had happened in the past, believing itself to be Marcus reborn. A battle then erupted. Rebecca and Billy defeated the Queen Leech in its giant form, and they escaped the base together before it exploded. After their narrow escape, the two said their goodbyes, and Rebecca headed towards the mansion in the distance, leading directly to the events of Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil, with Bravo Team, sent out the night before, having lost all contact with headquarters. On July 24, 1998, the Raccoon City Police Department decided to dispatch Alpha Team by helicopter to the Arclay Mountains to search and assess the situation. The Alpha Team lineup included Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Joseph Frost, pilot Brad Vickers, and Albert Wesker in the role of captain, who was actually a spy for Umbrella, sent to monitor and manipulate the entire operation. Immediately after landing, the team was attacked by a pack of mutated dogs. In a panic, Brad took off, abandoning his teammates. With no other choice, the survivors ran towards a large nearby building to find shelter, and that place was the Spencer Mansion. Once inside the mansion, the group quickly realized it had become a deadly nest of infection. Infected people roamed the halls, along with countless of Umbrella's experimental creatures that had escaped from the underground lab below. While investigating the mansion, Chris met Rebecca Chambers, the medic from Bravo team, who had just survived the Queen Leech incident and had followed the trail to the Spencer Mansion to continue investigating the source of the disaster. As for Jill Valentine, her investigation led her deep into the Arclea laboratory, where she found irrefutable evidence that Albert Wesker was an Umbrella spy. With nothing left to hide, Wesker revealed himself and admitted his entire plan. He wanted to use the SARS forces as live test subjects to collect combat data on the BOWS and then send it back to Umbrella. Barry Burton, though he had realized the truth early on, was forced to follow Wesker's orders because his family was being threatened by Umbrella. To conclude his charade, Wesker released the Tyrant from its containment tank with the intention of eliminating all the survivors, simultaneously activating the self-destruct system to erase all traces related to Umbrella. However, this plan quickly fell apart when he was immediately impaled by the Tyrant T-2. Meanwhile, the surviving STARS members retreated to the helipad and were forced to confront the Tyrant in a final battle. Just in the nick of time, Brad Vickers returned and dropped a rocket launcher, allowing them to destroy the dangerous creature. The group managed to leave the area just before the Spencer Mansion and the Arclea laboratory were completely destroyed. As for Wesker, thanks to having injected himself with a mutant T-virus strain beforehand, he reawakened with superior regenerative abilities. Though he tried to collect the remaining data, all his efforts were thwarted by the security system. After defeating Lisa Trevor, Wesker managed to escape the mansion. Believed to be dead by both Umbrella and STARS, Wesker has operated in the shadows ever since, choosing his own path and completely severing ties with Umbrella. After the events at Arclea, William Birkin was held responsible by Umbrella's high command for the failure of the operation he and Wesker were involved in. Fearing Umbrella would seize the G-virus and eliminate him the way they did James Marcus, Birkin gradually formed the intention to betray them from within. Determined to complete the G-virus, Birkin secretly planned to sell it to the U.S. military in exchange for protection and asylum for his wife and daughter. However, Umbrella soon noticed the unusual signs. On the night of September 22, 1998, the Alpha Team leader of the U.S. Codename Hunk, along with a subordinate, infiltrated the research facility to retrieve the virus. During the struggle, Birkin was shot down and the U.S. team retreated with a suitcase containing samples of the T-virus and G-virus. However, in his dying moments, Birkin injected himself with the remaining G-virus sample. This caused him to transform into a giant creature with superior strength and regenerative abilities. Driven by vengeance, Birkin pursued the U.S. team into the underground sewer system, slaughtering the entire squad and consuming all the remaining G samples. In the process, many T-virus vials were shattered and fell into the sewer, where they were consumed by rats, which inadvertently spread the virus into the water supply, directly leading to the pandemic outbreak in Raccoon City. Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 2. 2 months after the horrific events at the Spencer Mansion, the surviving members of Alpha Team, having learned the truth about Umbrella, secretly planned to overthrow the corporation and expose all its crimes to the light. While Chris Redfield headed to Europe to hunt down Umbrella, Jill Valentine decided to stay in Raccoon City to continue her investigation. However, all her efforts and accusations were quickly suppressed by local authorities and Umbrella itself. At 8:07 p.m. on the evening of September 28th, Jill unexpectedly received a call from pilot Brad Vickers, warning her to leave the city immediately. Before she could figure out what was happening, Jill was attacked by Nemesis, a BOW, dispatched by Umbrella to eliminate the Alpha Team members. She was forced to escape her apartment via the fire escape and quickly realized that Raccoon City had completely fallen into chaos. The undead flooded the streets, buildings had collapsed, and screams echoed ceaselessly. Jill continued to be pursued by Nemesis and was fortunately rescued by Carlos Oliveira with an anti-tank rocket. At the Redstone Street subway station, she met Captain Mikhail Victor and learned that they were all members of the U.B.C.S., the biohazard countermeasure force deployed by Umbrella. Though reluctant to get involved with Umbrella again, Jill hesitantly agreed to cooperate with the common goal of evacuating the remaining survivors from Raccoon City by subway raid. After escaping a perilous hunt by Nemesis while restoring power to the train, Jill met up with Carlos again, and they managed to return to the station in time. Jill, Mikhail, Nikolai G.I., Novi F., and some civilians boarded the evacuation raid, while Carlos was assigned to stay in the city to continue assisting other survivors. As the train began to roll out of the city, Jill overheard a conversation between Mikhail and Nikolai, suspecting Nikolai of unusual behavior. While Nikolai was being questioned, Nemesis suddenly appeared and approached the group. Nikolai turned on them, locking Jill and Mikhail in to make his escape. Mikhail was then caught by Nemesis, and he detonated the explosive strap to his body, damaging the train. Jill followed the fire escape to the surface, only to face Nemesis once again, now deformed by its own regenerative abilities. The two fought a drawn-out battle, and in the end, Jill succeeded in destroying the monster with a rail cannon. However, it still managed to stab her with a spike containing the virus, causing Jill to become infected and lose consciousness, all witnessed by Nikolai. Carlos, while continuing his mission, discovered Jill was infected and immediately took her to a hospital where Nathaniel Bard was researching a vaccine for the pandemic raging in the city. Carlos left Jill in the care of his teammates and personally infiltrated the lab to find the vaccine. However, upon arrival, he found Bard had been murdered and uncovered the cruel truth about Umbrella's real role in the Raccoon City disaster. Carlos quickly brought the vaccine dose back to save Jill. There, he saw a news broadcast announcing that the U.S. government had decided to drop a nuclear bomb on Raccoon City to contain the outbreak. Realizing the severity of the situation, Carlos decided to find more vaccine to persuade the government not to blow up the city, while Jill remained in a coma on a hospital bed. In a downtown center in the suburbs of Raccoon City, a young man named Leon Scott Kennedy was on his way to the ER. For his first day of work, he stopped at a gas station on the side of the road and quickly noticed the unusual atmosphere and the strange sounds coming from inside. Upon entering to investigate, Leon witnessed a police officer being torn apart by a zombie, forcing him to open fire in self-defense. While trying to escape through the gas station, Leon accidentally ran into Claire Redfield, a young woman who had come to Raccoon City to find her brother Chris Redfield. Leon managed to rescue Claire, and the two quickly got in a car and left the place. However, they had no idea that the road ahead was leading them straight into hell. Arriving in a city already plunged into chaos, Leon and Claire were immediately attacked by a horde of zombies and were accidentally separated. From here, the story splits into two storylines. On one hand, Leon met Ada Wong in a parking garage when he was attacked by a zombie dog. She claimed to be an FBI agent sent to investigate Annette Birkin, William Birkin's wife. But in reality, Ada was a mercenary sent by a rival company of Umbrella to steal the G-virus. Exploiting the young officer's naivety, Ada persuaded Leon to accompany her on her mission, and he agreed, unaware that he was just a tool for her true purpose. Returning to Claire's perspective, she happened to meet and travel with Sherry Birkin, William Birkin's daughter, who was wandering alone amidst the pandemic. However, the little girl was unfortunately captured by Raccoon City's chief of police, Brian Irons. Claire reached the Raccoon orphanage where Sherry was being held to rescue her and discovered that Brian had been implanted with the G-virus by William Birkin for attempting to harm his daughter. After finding Sherry, Claire had to try to escape the pursuit of Mr. X, a B.O.W. sent by Umbrella to slaughter the survivors and recover the G-virus. Surprisingly, Mr. X was impaled by Birkin in his monster form with his claws. The confrontation inadvertently destroyed an elevator, causing the two girls to fall into the NESD research facility deep beneath the city. Meanwhile, in the sewer area, Ada, after escaping from a giant alligator, encountered Annette Birkin, the person Ada was looking for. The three had a confrontation and Annette quickly escaped, drawing them deeper into the NESD facility. There, Leon single-handedly defeated William Birkin, who had defeated Daka, who had now evolved to a monstrous size. He approached Annette to retrieve the G-virus sample and was told by her of Ada's true identity as a mercenary. Leon then confronted Ada, forcing them to draw guns on each other while the base was about to be destroyed by its self-destruct system. In a final effort to prevent the G-virus from falling into the wrong hands, Annette suddenly appeared and shot Ada, causing her to fall into a chasm with the G-virus sample, much to Leon's helplessness. He later reunited with Claire and Sherry, and the three of them boarded a train to escape the facility before it exploded. But William once again returned in the form of a giant mass of flesh and attacked the train. Fortunately, they succeeded in destroying the monster and safely escaped the city. Back to Jill, she woke up a few hours before the U.S. government officially dropped the bomb on Raccoon City to contain the outbreak. She was told that Carlos was looking for a vaccine to prevent that from happening. Jill made her way to the NESD facility and found the vaccine deep inside the research area. But then Nikolai appeared, stole it from her, and revealed that he was working with Umbrella on the corporation's evil plan, conveniently pushing Jill to fight Nemesis to collect combat data for the company. Continuing to face an unstoppable Nemesis, Jill finally succeeded in defeating it in its giant form with a massive railgun and proceeded to the rooftop. But Nikolai destroyed the vaccine right before her eyes, the only cure for the plague. Carlos then arrived to rescue Jill once more. The two boarded a helicopter, leaving Nikolai behind, and left the city before it was blown up. Jill swore that she would bring down Umbrella at all costs, ending the horrifying chain of events in Raccoon City. Resident Evil Code Veronica. After all that, a masked man appeared, and it was none other than Chris Redfield, who was still continuing the fight against bio threats across the globe. Ethan and Mia were then escorted by helicopter, leaving the scene to return to a normal life under the supervision of the B.S.A. Zoe Baker, the family's daughter, was also rescued by the B.S.A., just as Ethan had promised her. Resident Evil Village. 3 years after the events in Louisiana, Miranda was informed by the connections that Evelyn had been destroyed. However, the girl had managed to infect Mia and Ethan Winters with the mold. Under the arrangement and supervision of the B.S.A., the two were moved to Eastern Europe to live under a hidden identity. They later had a baby girl named Rosemary Winters. Believing that Rose was the ideal vessel to carry out her plan to resurrect Ava, which she had pursued for decades, Miranda immediately hatched a plan to kidnap the child. Using a spy embedded within the B.S.A., she completely faked Mia's appearance and identity to get close to Rosemary. However, after the Baker family incident, Chris Redfield had been secretly monitoring Miranda's activities and soon discovered her plot. As Ethan and Mia, actually Miranda in disguise, were arguing, Chris and his Hound Wolf squad, which he commanded, launched a raid, shooting Mia dead in front of Ethan, who had no idea what was happening. They then took Rose and subdued him. Ethan was then put in a vehicle with Rose and Mia's body to be transported to a base. However, during the transport, the dead Miranda suddenly reawakened, killed the two escorting soldiers, causing the vehicle to crash into the forest. Seizing the opportunity, she took Rose and left, heading straight for the remote village where her ritual was about to be performed. Ethan woke up after the crash and staggered towards the village to find Rose, only to realize that this was Miranda's territory, filled with countless lycans that had wiped out almost the entire village population. Ethan's search led him to meet the Duke, a mysterious merchant, who revealed the heartbreaking truth that Rose had been killed and her body parts were contained in 4 different flasks, currently guarded by the 4 lords of the land: Alcina Dimitriescu, Carla Heisenberg, Donna Beneviento, and Salvatore Moreau. Determined to save his daughter, Ethan defeated each lord one by one, with Carl Heisenberg being the last. Ethan then met Chris Redfield again, who finally revealed the whole truth. The Mia he had shot was actually Miranda in disguise, and she was the mastermind behind the entire tragedy. The story reached its climax when Miranda began the ritual to resurrect Ava, using the Molden Rose's parts. However, the ritual failed. The one resurrected was not Ava, but Rosemary herself, proving that after more than a century, Miranda's quest was ultimately meaningless. Pushed into despair, Miranda unleashed her fury on Ethan. But empowered by the love and will of a father, Ethan defeated Miranda. Knowing he had no chance of survival, he decided to sacrifice himself to destroy Miranda and the Mega Mycete for good. Chris Redfield fulfilled Ethan's final wish, saving Mia and Rose. When the bomb exploded, it not only obliterated Miranda and the source of the mold in the village, but also brought an end to the journey of Ethan Winters, a husband, a father, and a man who fought to his last breath for his family. And that was the last main game in the acclaimed series from Capcom. Resident Evil Code Veronica takes players to a branch of the story focusing on the Ashford family, one of the founding families of Umbrella, with Edward Ashford as one of the 3 co-founders of the corporation. After his father's death, Alexander Ashford gradually fell into despair and harbored resentment towards Umbrella, as he witnessed the Ashford family's decline, losing their reputation and influence within the corporation. To prevent Oswald Spencer from seizing all of Umbrella's power and to restore the family's prestige, Alexander initiated Project Code Veronica. Its goal was to extract DNA from the preserved remains of Veronica Ashford, who had once brought the Ashford dynasty to the pinnacle of power, in order to create an individual who could rival her. The result of this experiment was the birth of the twin siblings, Alexei Ashford and Alfred Ashford. From a young age, Alexei quickly demonstrated a superior genius-level intellect, graduating from a prestigious university at only 10 years old. With a close relationship to Umbrella, she was immediately recruited as a virologist. In her research, Alexia successfully combined the progenitor virus with an ancient virus discovered in the body of a queen ant, thereby creating the T-Veronica virus. The turning point occurred in February 1983, around her 12th birthday, when Alexia and Alfred accidentally discovered a secret room in the research facility. There, they learned the truth about their own origins, that they were merely products of an inhumane experiment. Hatred for their creator erupted, and the siblings captured Alexander Ashford and used him as a test subject for the T-Veronica virus, turning him into a deranged, mutated creature named Nosferatu. Continuing to monitor and study their father's transformation, Alexia gradually realized the flaws that still existed within the virus. After improving T-Veronica, she decided to inject it directly into her own body to harness the power this virus offered. To control the transformation process and avoid losing her human form, Alexia put herself into a state of cryosleep for 15 years to slow the virus's evolution. Before entering the cryogenic pod, she entrusted the duty of guarding the facility to her brother Alfred. Returning to the present day, specifically 3 months after the events in Raccoon City, Claire Redfield traveled to Umbrella's Paris headquarters to continue searching for her brother. She was discovered while infiltrating the base and was taken by Amanda Rodrigo to a detention facility on Rockfort Island, a prison for Umbrella's enemies, with Alfred Ashford now as the commander of the base. Around the same time, a paramilitary force called DHCF, affiliated with an organization rivaling Umbrella, launched a raid on the island prison to collect data on bioweapon samples. You knew that the person directly commanding this operation was none other than Albert Wesker, who was now operating independently for his own purposes. The attack inadvertently caused a T-virus leak, quickly plunging the entire area into chaos as the infected one by one turned into zombies. The explosion during the raid accidentally freed Claire from her cell but also thrust her back into a nightmare of survival. On her journey to escape the island, Claire met another prisoner, Steve Burnside, and the two teamed up to survive the twisted challenges set up by Alfred Ashford, who had now almost completely lost his mind with a distorted psyche after his sister went into cryosleep. Eventually, Claire and Steve were lucky enough to find a plane and used it to escape the base. However, Alfred had secretly switched the control system to autopilot, causing the plane to head straight for Umbrella's secret base in Antarctica. Chris Redfield, after returning from his hunt for Umbrella in Europe, received a distress email from Claire and immediately set off for Rockfort Island to rescue her. But instead of finding his sister, Chris unexpectedly ran into Wesker, whom he thought had died after the Arclay incident. He was quickly overwhelmed by Wesker's superhuman strength and speed but managed to escape and used a found plane to head to Antarctica to continue his search. Claire and Steve landed at the Antarctic base and realized that an outbreak had also occurred there. They confronted both Alfred and the monster Nosferatu, successfully defeating them before leaving on a snowmobile. Alfred, in his dying moments, returned to his sister's cryo-sleep pod and awakened Alexia from her slumber. Seeing her brother collapse before her, she used the power she had developed over 15 years, summoning a long tentacle and capturing Claire and Steve as they were trying to escape. Chris arrived in time and was reunited with his sister, while Steve had been implanted with the T-Veronica virus by Alexia, transforming him into a ferocious creature. However, the remaining shred of humanity in him awakened in time, and Steve took his own life so as not to harm Claire, the girl he had fallen in love with. Afterward, the Redfield siblings teamed up to confront and defeat Alexia in her giant monster form and managed to escape before the base exploded. After that ordeal, Chris and Claire became officially determined to enter the long fight to bring down Umbrella. Not long after escaping Raccoon City, Leon and the young Sherry were captured by the United States military. He was considered a potential threat because he knew too much about the government's significant role leading to the pandemic in the Raccoon City incident. However, instead of eliminating him, they recognized that Leon possessed extraordinary combat skills, having survived and returned from hell, and they gave him two choices: either remain completely silent about Umbrella, which was being established with the purpose of hunting down the remnants of the corporation to prevent a biological catastrophe, or be eliminated. And of course, he chose to become a government agent. In 2002, Leon and Officer Jack Krauser undertook a mission to infiltrate a small South American nation to track down Javier Hidalgo, a drug lord connected to Umbrella. The two were sent to investigate and prevent a potential outbreak. Just as the government feared, the team arrived at a village during their mission and discovered an outbreak that had turned the residents into zombies. They found a young girl named Manuela, Javier's daughter, who was suffering from a rare disease and was being kept alive by her father with the T-Veronica virus. They continued their journey into the base to capture Javier, but were stopped by Manuela's mother, who was now a monster. The two quickly teamed up to defeat it, but Krauser was unfortunately struck by a spine containing the T-Veronica virus and transformed into a giant creature. Manuela, after unleashing the power of the T-virus, joined forces with Krauser and Leon to defeat the drug lord and boarded a helicopter to leave the base, leaving everything behind. After this incident, the fact that Krauser's arm could not be healed led to his discharge from the U.S. As a high-ranking officer, Krauser could not accept his fate, and his growing resentment led him to make an extreme decision. Krauser faked his death in an accident and sought out Albert Wesker, believing he was the only one who could help him regain his strength and achieve the power he craved. Krauser then went to an island in the region of Spain under Wesker's orders to collect a Plague sample for his next plan. In exchange for the Plague sample, Krauser was hired by the Los Ilum in a DOS cult to kidnap the U.S. President's daughter, which directly led to the events of Resident Evil 4. In 2004, Leon was sent to the remote village of Valdlobos to find Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, based on intelligence from the U.S. Secret Service indicating she had been seen in the area. Upon arriving in the village, Leon quickly realized it was the territory of the Los Illuminados cult, and all the villagers had become Ganados followers under the control of Osman Saddler via the Las Plagas parasite. Even Leon himself was soon injected with the plague. Throughout his journey, he received help from a mysterious stranger named Luis Sierra, a former Umbrella Zionist who revealed Ashley's location and developed a drug to help Leon temporarily resist Saddler's control. Not only Luis, but he also unexpectedly met Ada Wong again, who was thought to have died in the Raccoon City incident. She had been sent by Wesker on a mission to retrieve a specimen called the Amber, currently held by Saddler. Realizing they both had the same target, Saddler, Leon undated decided to cooperate once more and used a boat to travel to the island where the old generation of Ganados were once imprisoned, now the cult's base. Leon reunited with Ashley, and the two entered Luis's old lab, successfully removing the Las Plagas from their bodies. Once free from Saddler's control, Leon coordinated with Ada to fight Saddler in his giant monster form and finally defeated the insane cult leader. Leon reunited with Ashley as the entire base was about to explode, and the two quickly escaped the island on a water scooter, returning to the United States in the twilight. Ada, after leaving with the Amber specimen, was told by Wesker about a sinister plan. She decided to turn her back on him and disappeared with the helicopter, ending the events in Valdlobos and the Los Illuminados cult. Lost in Nightmares Resident Evil 5. After the disaster in Raccoon City, despite everything, Oswald Spencer's ambitions had not faded. The ghost of his dream of becoming a god continued to haunt him, until the final days of his life. Spencer spent the rest of his life immersed in a frenzy of research, desperately searching for a mutant virus that could prolong the life that was gradually leaving his frail body. But all efforts led to dead ends and failed experiments. When death was near and there was no other way, Spencer made one final gamble. He intentionally leaked his location to Albert Wesker through an intermediary, hoping that his creation would continue to fulfill his unfinished dream, researching the power that could overcome the limits of death. When Wesker appeared, Spencer, now just a withered shadow of the man who once manipulated the world, revealed the truth about the Wesker Project and his distorted vision of a future where humanity evolved into super-minus beings, and he, the originator of it all, would reign as a god of the new world. But Wesker, now holding a different ideology, felt only rage and contempt. The truth that he had been nothing but a tool to be used from beginning to end ignited his fury. Without hesitation, Wesker ruthlessly ended Spencer's life, extinguishing the life of the one who had sown the seeds of every disaster. In that final moment, Spencer's dream died with him, and Wesker coldly declared that the one who would become the god of the new world would be him. Around the same time, outside the mansion, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, now members of the BSAAIO Tremorist Security Assessment Alliance, arrived. But unexpectedly, what awaited them was Wesker and Spencer's corpse. The three fought, but Jill and Chris were quickly outmatched by Wesker's now minus prodigious strength. With no other choice, Jill decided to sacrifice herself, pushing Wesker out a window, and the two fell into the chasm below while Chris helplessly screamed Jill's name in despair. 3 years after those events, Chris Redfield was deployed by the BSAA to Africa to investigate illegal bioweapon trafficking activities in the autonomous region of Kiju, where a wave of plague infections had previously occurred. Upon arrival, he was introduced to his new partner, Chevy Alomar, a local BSAA agent. Before they could settle in, the two were attacked by local people infected with an improved type to plague parasite, turning them into Magi warriors. This investigation led Chris and Sheva to a bioweapons dealer who had experimented with plagues on the Kijuju villagers, causing the outbreak in the area. They coincidentally discovered that Jill Valentine, who was thought to be dead, was actually still alive but was being brainwashed and controlled by Wesker. As for Albert Wesker, he was also present in the area, carrying out a global minus-scale plan to release a new virus called Ouroboros. He believed this virus would eliminate most of humanity, leaving only those who were suitable for Wesker to rebuild the human race according to his will. Not allowing that apocalyptic scenario to happen, Chris and Sheva managed to free Jill from Wesker's control. After being freed, Jill revealed that Wesker had to use a special serum to stabilize the virus in his body. If he overdosed, it would have the opposite effect and become a poison to him. Based on this information, Chris and Sheva pursued Wesker to a stealth bomber filled with missiles carrying the Ouroboros virus that he intended to use for global distribution. During this confrontation, Chris injected Wesker with an overdose of the serum, severely weakening him. Deprived of his strength, Wesker decided to absorb Ouroboros into his body, transforming himself into a grotesque creature with horrifying power. Chris and Sheva were forced to fight him in the heart of a blazing volcano, where the monster was finally pushed into the molten lava, causing him to be incinerated. putting an end to the most iconic villain of the Resident Evil series. After the events in Africa, a series of central threats to the Resident Evil universe, such as Spencer and Wesker, as well as the Umbrella Corporation, had essentially been completely dismantled. This left the series at a standstill, without a villain of sufficient stature to continue driving the story. Yet, instead of concluding the franchise, Capcom continued to milk it once more in Resident Evil 6, with the scale of the problem elevated to a global biotremorous catastrophe, bringing together both old and new characters with multiple separate campaign storylines. Despite its grand scale, Resident Evil 6 is often considered the weakest in the entire series, losing its familiar feel and adding many unnecessary new faces, making the content more confusing and complex, but without leaving many noteworthy details in the overall story that followed. Therefore, to avoid unnecessary length, we will not go too deep into the lore and will only focus on the main events of this game. Resident Evil 6 is set in 2012-2013, when the world is facing the threat of a new pandemic on a global scale, caused by a new virus called the C-virus. The masterminds behind this plot are a bioterrorist organization called Neo-Umbrella. Their goal is to spread the disease and destroy the world order. Information about this terrorist attack quickly reached biotremorists counter organizations worldwide, forcing them to begin operations to eliminate this threat. The story begins on Christmas Eve, December 24, 2012. Jake Muller, the long-lost biological son of Albert Wesker, now a mercenary for the EM Liberation Army, was approached and captured by Sherry Birkin, William Birkin's daughter, now grown up and working for the BSA. She was after him because his blood contained a rare antibody that could be used to create an antidote for the C-virus. Chris Redfield was also present with the BSA team escorting the two out of Edonia, but both parties were ambushed by Neo-Umbrella, led by Ada Wong, who was actually Carl or a dames in disguise. A little about this character: she was originally a scientist for an organization called the Family and was assisted by Derek Clifford Simmons, a man of great influence within the group, in her bioweapon research. Over time, Carla developed an intense obsession with Simmons and relentlessly pushed herself to achieve outstanding results just to gain his recognition. However, Simmons had no feelings for Carla. Instead, he was infatuated with Ada Wong, with whom he had previously collaborated. Out of this sick obsession, he began a side project of the C-virus called Project Ada, aiming to create a perfect clone of Ada Wong. The only successful subject was Carla Adames herself. Returning to the main timeline, U.S. President Adam Benford was planning to publicly disclose the government's role in the 1998 Raccoon City incident at a conference. However, a terrorist attack broke out at that very moment, inadvertently turning him into a zombie. Leon Kennedy, who was part of the security detail for the event, was forced to shoot and kill the president to save Helena Harper, who then claimed she was involved in the terrorist attack. She revealed that the person behind everything was National Security Advisor Derek Clifford Simmons, whom we mentioned earlier. The two began to track him to Lanshan, China. On June 30, 2013, Chris Redfield and Piers Nevans were sent to Lanshan to hunt down Carla in her aided disguise and coincidentally met Leon and Helena, who were also there. An argument broke out when Chris wanted revenge for his fallen comrades, while Leon tried to protect her, unaware that it wasn't the real Ada. They made peace and focused on the immediate goal: eliminating Simmons and ending the global threat. Simmons, after being unexpectedly injected with the C-virus by a JEO monster, mutated into a creature with many different forms. Leon and Helena fought each of Simmons's forms time and again and finally defeated the villain. Meanwhile, Chris and Nevans, after chasing and eliminating the fake Ada, were sent by Leon to an oil rig after hearing that Jake and Sherry were being held captive there. The rescue led them to a confrontation with an ultimate BOWHAOS, which was created to spread the C-virus worldwide. While Jake and Sherry escaped the oil rig, Chris and Nevans fought against the giant monster and were quickly overwhelmed by its strength and size. Piers, with no other choice, injected himself with the C-virus, giving himself enhanced strength, and sacrificed himself so that Chris could get into an escape pod and leave the rig before it exploded. The story ends with Jake donating his blood sample to the government to create a vaccine. Helena was exonerated after evidence incriminating Simmons was found, and she joined the biotremorists' counter-force. As for Leon and Chris, they continued on their path of preventing future disasters. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. The origins of the events in Resident Evil 7 begin in 2000 when the Connections, an international criminal organization, approached Miranda with the promise of helping her resurrect her daughter, Ava. In return, they would be allowed access to samples of the mold that she was researching for their bioweapon development. After years of dedicated research, the Connections succeeded in combining a mold sample with Ava's DNA, provided by Miranda, thereby creating Evelyn, a little girl, or more accurately, a bioweapon possessing the ability to control anyone who came into contact with the mold produced from her body. Despite possessing superhuman abilities, Evelyn was a failure in Miranda's eyes because she had too many flaws to be the perfect host for Ava as originally intended, especially her accelerated aging rate whenever she used her powers, which meant Evelyn did not meet the goal Miranda had set. Therefore, she decided to hand over all responsibility for overseeing Evelyn to the Connections. Evelyn's existence, along with the risk of a new biological pandemic, quickly came to the attention of the B.A., forcing the Connections to put Evelyn into hiding. In October 2014, Evelyn was escorted by two of the organization's agents, Alan Roney and Mia Winters, to another research facility in Central America on the cargo ship Annabelle. However, during the journey, the ship was caught in a violent tropical storm, causing Evelyn to become unstable. The girl vomited a huge amount of mold, infecting the entire crew, leading to the ship being torn apart by the storm and washing ashore in the swamps of Dulve, Louisiana. The Baker family, living near the area, discovered the incident and brought Evelyn home to care for her, completely unaware that they had just brought an Ebly bioweapon into their own home. After waking up, Evelyn began to infect and control all the members of the Baker family, turning the place into her own territory. As for Mia, she managed to leave a short video to warn her husband to stay away before Evelyn used her powers to knock her unconscious. This directly led to the horrifying chain of events in Resident Evil 7. 3 years after the ship incident, Ethan Winters followed clues from the video sent by his wife and found his way to the Baker family estate, deep in the Dulve swamps. He snuck inside and quickly found Mia, but by this time, she had lost her mind and lunged to attack Ethan under Evelyn's control, forcing him to kill his own wife before he could understand what was happening. Ethan was then knocked out by Jack Baker, and when he woke up, he found himself being treated to a grotesque dinner with the other members of the Baker family, including Marguerite Baker, Lucas Baker. Ethan later freed himself and was contacted by Zoe Baker, the only daughter of the Baker family who was not fully under Evelyn's control. She explained what had happened to her family and guided him on how to escape. According to her plan, Ethan needed to collect specimens hidden throughout the house to create a special enzyme capable of eliminating the mold from the body and escaping Evelyn's control. Alone, Ethan fought each member of the Baker family, as well as a host of misshapen creatures created by the mold. Although he eventually collected enough ingredients for Zoe to synthesize the enzyme, as the group was arguing heatedly over who would get to use the dose, Jack Baker, in the form of a giant monster, suddenly appeared and attacked. Ethan was forced to take up arms to fight and survive. Just as Jack was about to finish him off, Ethan used one of the only 2 enzyme doses, injecting it into Jack's body, thereby ending his madness and saving himself. Now, with only 1 dose of the enzyme left, Ethan faced a difficult choice: save his wife Mia, or Zoe, the one who had helped him all this time. In the end, Ethan chose Mia, leaving Zoe in anger and despair, but still promising he would call for help to rescue her. Ethan and Mia got on a small boat nearby and quietly left the Dulve swamp. After everything they had been through at the Baker estate, the two finally had a chance to sit down and talk. It seemed the tragedy was over, but their joy was short-lived as the boat inadvertently took them to the exact location where the Annabelle had wrecked. This alerted Evelyn. She pulled Ethan into the shipwreck, leaving Mia to find a way to save him on her own. In a comatose state, Ethan drifted into his subconscious and met Jack Baker again, in his normal human form. Jack, in his ultimate pain and regret, explained that his family were not the bad guys, but that Evelyn was the one behind all the tragedies. He pleaded with Ethan to free his family. After being rescued by Mia, Ethan woke up and returned to the Baker estate to find Evelyn, who was now in hiding and constantly manipulating his mind with the power of the mole. However, with a strong will, Ethan managed to stay sane and successfully injected a vial of E-necrotoxin into Evelyn. Due to overusing her powers for a long time, Evelyn reverted to her root from the old woman in the wheelchair. In despair, the little girl from years ago broke down in tears, admitting that the only thing she ever wanted was a family. Immediately after, she erupted in a fit of rage, transforming into a giant creature, forcing Ethan into one last fight. Just then B.S.A. forces arrived on the scene to provide support, tossing him a special mine, a Somme gun that helped Ethan completely destroy Evelyn, officially closing the tragedy of the Baker family and the disaster in Dulve. As of now, it has truly been a long journey, full of loss, sacrifice, and tragedies that have spanned generations, hasn't it? Hopefully, after this video, you have a clearer view of the Resident Evil universe, a place with not only tense survival minus action sequences but also the stories hidden behind every event, details that we might have accidentally missed while playing. Hopefully, with all the contention above, you are now ready to step into the newest game, Resident Evil Requiem. So what will the story of Resident Evil Requiem entail? Stay tuned for our next videos. Take care and see you again.